Today I march Sigmar's holy baldtide to cleanse the old world on immortal empires, and even the strongest grudges don't stand a chance against the bald. And this was like my first big campaign on immortal empires, so you already know it had to be with
Summon the Elector Count.
the Empire. But my boy Carl, as much as I played him 1,000 times on Warhammer 2, had to take a backseat for the big beautiful man that is Volkmar, the king of the Southlands Battle Dome. And when I started this, I had no idea the endgame scenario was going to turn this into a literal nightmare, but also be so much more fun than any Warhammer 2 campaign that I've ever played. And it really helped that Volkmar's starting stack was one of the most insane that I've ever seen. Like, the army's cracked, you start with an Inquisitor, and you can get these big fat boys on turn 1, and they're going to be in this army until I beat the campaign. They really didn't know what they were signing up for, and it also makes no sense why you can get an S tier unit in the first 5 seconds of the game, but I've seen a ton of people complaining about how hard the Empire campaigns were with the new setup, and it's really not that bad when you get to play as ogres early game, and you don't have to use Imperial Authority, but you do have to know how to read, which sucks because I can't. But our story begins like every other Total War campaign, and that's by backdooring your biggest threat in the first couple of turns, because someone slightly bolder than us is just not allowed to exist, and we can't let lore repeat itself. So Manfred's got to take the first massive L on this journey. So you know he was malding after we took his hometown, and he tried to show us what the true power of his shiny little head could do, but he didn't know that I had way more shiny-headed warriors. So turn 9 and 10, we basically just turbo slam Manfred right off the map. And at this stage of the game, usually the Empire doesn't feel so good, but Volkmar just powers through this like it's no tomorrow. I actually love what they did with Immortal Empires, and even though I've played Empire 1,000 times on Warhammer 2, I'm going to do it again here. So after consolidating in a small fight with the lizards in the south, they gave up all hope and paid me to leave, so I used my newfound riches to go farm some skeleton boys and used my super sneaky ultra ambush stance to bait some Tomb Kings into the biggest L of their lives. Come on, my bald head shining like a treasure in the desert. You know you want it. It's so easy, bro. And I can't believe how easy it is to steamroll undead as Volkmar. But then I found out Cetra was feeding Scarbrand into the late game like Fusi versus KSI in the ring. So we had to put a stop to that, and of course we backdoored his hometown like any true total player would. But they didn't like that, so they zerged us, and I had to win a massive fight, but they just didn't stand a chance against Volkmar's insane replenishment. It's so ungodly high that I can regen my whole army without even thinking, so I smashed my quests right after that, just to make sure Scarbrand wouldn't be any kind of problem. And this Reichwind quest felt like really easy, and I was ready for them to attack me from behind like the old one, but they only ever came out of the front, and all I had to do was take out their commander, and they got zerged out by the Reichsguard. So now that Volkmar is more charged up than a kid on Fortnite with Kamehameha, I had to put the Tomb Kings in the dirt. Pyrrhic victory, I lose every unit. Huh. Oh, somehow I don't think that's how that's going to go. And unfortunately, we lost our regiment of renowned bald boys. Rest in peace, brothers. So we just replaced them with the normies, and we pulled up on Scarbrand. And after sieging him, we knew that surely he wouldn't be too scared to sally out, and he wasn't, and immediately regretted his decision, dying instantly. Anticlimactic as fuck. He just died. Stupid. And at this stage, I also had no clue about the books of Nagash because I can't read. So it's only at this stage that I started actually going for them, and of course you already know how we do it here. And that's to backdoor the main settlement, crippling everything a faction can do. And I accidentally recruited Gotrek and Felix, but they're not bald enough to be in my campaign. Let's get that straight right now. So he's just bait. And after I got the first book, I realized the massive mistake was not getting all of these sooner, and it was going to be even worse later. So I set the Zerker gang up and got number 2 right after this and had some pretty heavy losses, but because the guys we lost weren't that bald, it didn't really matter that much. But as we did that, Krokgar decided that he was the baldest and wanted this smoke, which obviously he regretted immediately and got completely smashed. The problem for me that everything was actually about to fall apart because this bowl cut looking French trap pulled up on me at the same time as the grudge tide. And this was the closest I've ever come to losing a Warhammer campaign. I've lost them in other games like Shogun when I first started, but this was actually hard. These endgame scenarios are insane if you're not ready for them, so I tried to rush my boy Volkmar home as fast as possible so I didn't lose, and you can see we had a couple of problems on the way home. So I speed ran the Tomb Kings that were still hanging out here for some reason. I couldn't afford to auto-resolve any of these battles, so we full sweated against the dwarves and used our obviously impeccable shiny ambush tactics to gank the wannabe baldies in the forest. And that's when I realized the dwarves aren't very good at fighting supercharged crazy bald men. So I pulled up on the fattest stack of them that I could find, and I knew if I beat them, I could definitely save my campaign. So I obviously decided to spawn camp them. If they have 4 armies, I should be allowed to cheese them that much. But this forest battle was actually insane, and I was sniping their reinforcements with the Gatling gun wagons and hit this fat dwellers below that killed pretty much their whole army. And I don't know what they did to life wizards, but they seem like insanely strong. and I'm all about that. And even though this was such a massive battle, I literally didn't even lose one man. So I swept south and sent the Zerker gang to defend my right side, and the plan was to re-kit Volkmar's army when I got back to the main area, so he'd be twice as bald and ready to power through the rest of the game. But I should have ran straight home because I wasn't really paying attention to my left side, and things could have been a little bit better. And there was really no winning this fight. Well, we probably could have, but just in case, I used one of our baldists to get the job done as bait. So we sent Eben out into the fray, and he was obliterated on his retreat. But it was all planned so we could stop the midgets from stacking up on each other and sieging our walls down. So we had a short moment of safety, but they actually just kept coming like a short zerg of really mad Oompa Loompas. So after our third siege in a row, which also prevented regen and stacked attrition on us, things were looking pretty grim. One could say Volkmar the Grim.
Oh, bro, you kids about to get dumpied, bro. I'm gonna tell you.
And that's right, we balded our way home just in time to actually save the game. And I was actually getting heated up about losing, so the Zerker gang struck down the low-tier losers at Khemri, and Volkmar was ready to summon the baldtide. The moment I've been waiting for this entire time. These guys actually got stomped so hard it wasn't even funny. And then young Bullcut figured she was stronger than the short stack, and obviously she hadn't met the baldtide yet because those luscious locks enraged my boys to their core about what they used to have on top of their heads. And I don't know why they were so weak, but they couldn't even take an auto-resolve versus Flagellants, so I thought that was actually hilarious. And I decided at this stage of the game, it was time to swap the Zerker gang and Volkmar, and have Volkmar go purge the east, and have the Zerker gang lock down the west and level up. And honestly, the dwarves at the top right never really stood a chance against the new and improved baldtide. And of course, we got to keep it real because we can't just get rid of our fat men or our great swords because they've been with us since turn 1. And they'll be sticking with us either until they die or the campaign ends. So after stomping out the last big dwarf threat on my side of the map, I realized that I was so far behind on collecting books that it was probably going to stay that way for quite a while. Usually by turn 150 on Warhammer 2, I'm almost done painting the map. But my god, I felt like actually challenged by the amount of dwarves just when they came. And I think that the next campaign I play, I'm going to set it to the earliest possible turn because it just makes everything so much harder. And I'm just going to send it and see what happens. But then I guess things were happening on the right side and I didn't really care because those were just abandoned settlements. So I'm just going to see how far they'll go without me actually doing anything. And I realized that I should have taken the Black Pyramid like 100 turns ago. And that was really silly of me. And they were sitting outside of it. So you already know we cheesed them right out of the pyramid. And this was way too easy considering how hard the Black Pyramid used to be, but maybe my boys are just that strong. You also know things are really bad when the only guys on the map that want to be your friends are the rebels, and god, this is such a disaster. And before anyone asks, I refuse any allegiance unless their heads are as shiny and as bright as Volkmar's, or as bright as the patrons shine. Thanks again for the extra love, boys. But after the Black Pyramid, I decided to sweep Bullcut off the face of the earth, because honestly, she really pissed me off after trying to backdoor me. And she timed it perfectly with the grudge tide too, like give me a break. And having all that hair really didn't make Volkmar feel very comfortable. With the dastardly plot we had for the old world, it just wasn't part of the plan. The problem is I always wanted to fight Bullcut, but they're so much weaker in battle than they are in the auto-resolve, it feels like a waste of time. And this is on very hard, so I'm just not too sure why they weren't recruiting cavalry. But even their settlements get rocket batteried off the map so easily, it's like Bretoni is just kind of a meme to fight. So I really didn't know how to feel about that. So as I was sweeping her off the map, Tic-Tac-Toe decided he wanted to step up to the barber and get trimmed up. But he didn't know I had been recruiting the baldtide this entire time. And this was probably the most hilarious siege battle I've ever won. I just literally W-keyed the settlement and ran it over with the quickness. Like I had no idea that if you just stopped caring about every single mechanic in the game and ran straight at it with enough dudes, that the problem was solved. And I do have to say, this is the most fun I've had playing a game in years. Even with its bugs, it's so massive, I just actually don't care. And since I auto-resolve or cheese every settlement battle, it really doesn't affect me that much. But after this battle, it was the first time that I really realized that if I just spammed Juice Flagellants and Hellstorm rocket batteries, I could take over the whole world. And so after I cut off Tic-Tac-Toe's only real base of operations, I finally had a chance to breathe and stabilize the game. And with Bob the Builder pushing south, I was instant building every new spot we were at, and it finally let me start constructing the overpowered doom stacks that no army could stop. So Volkmar went north to re-smash the dwarves' new stronghold, and they were being so persistent that it was actually disgusting. But I did get distracted and got my wizard sniped here, which sucked, but he was just a crutch, and at the end of the day, he wasn't bald enough, so I just kept sweeping right until he respawned while I was smashing Krokar. And for some reason, our really good friend Kalita that we didn't backdoor once ever was holding the Vamps and Nurgle at bay. So I actually decided to just leave her alone and then backdoor her again later on when I'm done dealing with everything in the south. Because now I'm feeling good. And sweeping Krokgar and Tic-Tac-Toe off the map really felt like the best play. And then Oxodal decided he wanted to get trimmed up like the rest of his boys. So now basically I'm just purging lizards and dwarves at this stage of the game. And now that I'm more prepared for the dwarf armies and I'm just countering them, they are just super weak. They can't fight me at all. They pull up and just get obliterated. I started using 2 Inquisitors in my armies. Accusation is just broken. It slows them down. They lose their armor. It's actually just disgusting. They pull up and I don't even know what to say, honestly. It's just an absolute mess. So the Zerka gang finished off Rapance and left her one last settlement and turned it into a big EXP farm so that our future baldtides could just get juiced up super easily. And then I started pushing to the north and took out the last bit of dwarves on my side of the map. I saw Sartosa and realized that's a new beachhead in a new land. And I could finally use that to counterattack the dwarves and take out their main settlements so that I wouldn't have no more dwarf tides to deal with at all. And then with my bald tide farming insane amounts of EXP off of the last bit of Bretonia, which like was just so easy, and every time another army popped up on my west coast to like try and pull up on anything that I was doing, I just used that army and sent it over and blasted them and then came back and farmed Bretonia over and over and over again. And I'm going to keep doing that until these armies are strong enough to push out and take over the whole world. Then when I finally got to Sartosa, I didn't realize that it was going to be a nightmare battle, so I had to sit there for 20 minutes sieging and cheesing my way to the victory and slowly took it over. Sartosa is probably one of the worst places to siege that I've ever been in, but after getting it, I felt pretty good. And then in the south, I slowly started trying to ambush everything down there, but the lizards didn't fall for the shiny head in the jungle like the Tomb Kings fell for the shiny head in the sands. So I just had to keep blasting them without thinking about it. And while I was pushing down the east with Volkmar to finish off Krokgar, his new and improved army felt actually unstoppable at this stage, and I actually just speed ran his last large settlement. The only thing that was weird is this settlement was the exact same as Tic-Tac-Toe's main settlement, but I'm assuming it's just like a jungle zone diversity thing. But it doesn't really matter at the end of the day because I'm just here for the massive brawl to purge the wicked, which is my favorite way to play anyways. I just go for the big massive fights, and that's all I try to get because winning is just secondary. But after that, we ended up with a pretty big problem because the dwarves were Zerg sieging Sartosa, and as we found out earlier, that actually just stacks attrition on your army so you can't regen. So after smoking 3 waves of them and not letting me get out of the settlement, I actually had to retreat into the ocean and abandon our new beachhead. And after that, I realized I probably could have just like parked myself at the small entrance and like just pump them down, but that's what I'm gonna do the next time I go back up there because I don't like saves coming and like loading backwards. I just don't see the point because I used to play on legendary a lot. I actually had an issue with legendary, like because it was saving so much, it was actually corrupting my game and causing it just to spam crash. So I've actually downgraded to very hard, but I don't really see the difference. And I've heard a lot of people say normal was actually harder than very hard. So I'm going to have to try a normal campaign out and basically see what that's all about. But what I did know for sure was that I was going to come back bigger, balder, better, and stronger than they could possibly imagine, with 10 times the bald that they could handle. Because with failures come balance, and I accidentally caught Teclis trying to ambush me and spawn camped him while I swarmed the settlement with the bald tide of Volkmar himself. And I guess at some stage Birdman declared war on me, so now I have to go turbo take him out as fast as possible so he doesn't change the ways on me and mauled me out because I can't afford to lose my hair. But as you can see, the map is painted a nice yellow, and I've won the Southlands Brawl with an insane hang-up from the Dwarf Tide. So when I record the rest of it, you'll get to see the true power of the Bald Tide, so look forward to part 2, the Baldening.